What if Jax doesn't actually have trypophobia in the way you're thinking of? And what if Kinger has the complete opposite reaction to the exact same condition because it just reminds him of the person he loved the most?
You look beautiful, honey.
So we all know that Jax from the amazing Digital Circus has trypophobia, an intense fear, disgust, or aversion triggered by repetitive patterns of small, closely packed together bumps or holes. So if you have this phobia and you see stuff like honeycombs, lotus seed pods, or even corn, your skin is probably crawling by now, and you might feel genuinely nauseous or anxious.
It's gross. Makes my skin crawl.
Interesting.
But something I noticed is that Kinger seems to have the exact opposite of trypophobia. Trypophilia, if you will. And yes, I know it's not a real word, but all words are made up, so we're rolling with this one. And I'll explain everything in a second, but first we need to talk about Jax. Or actually, why he might not even have trypophobia in the traditional sense that you're thinking of.
You afraid of corn?
No. Who's afraid of corn?
The condition is usually described as an irrational fear, but based on what we know about Jax and Ribbit, I honestly don't think his reaction is irrational at all. The show never makes it fully clear why Jax is disgusted by corn or pomegranates, or even when this started. But considering the trauma that he experienced with his best friend Ribbit, I think his trypophobia may have actually developed from seeing Ribbit abstracting. Because abstracted characters in the show are these huge, dark, animal-like entities covered in hypnotizing eyes, and those eyes are basically holes with more rotating holes inside of them. Like, I'd be traumatized too if I saw this for the first time. And if this is true, then Jax's avoidance of clustered holes suddenly isn't irrational. It becomes a trauma response. Every time he sees those patterns, he could subconsciously be reminded of his friend's digital death. And what makes this even more believable is that trypophobia reactions are usually much stronger when the patterns appear on living things or bodies. So if his brain connected those patterns to seeing Ribbit's body transform and abstract, then honestly, his reaction makes perfect sense. Now, if Jax already had trypophobia before entering the circus, then Ribbit's abstraction probably just made it worse because now those patterns are tied directly to trauma and grief. But regardless of where it started, one thing stays consistent. People with trypophobia usually react with disgust more than fear, which is actually why scientists debated for years whether this even counts as a real phobia in the first place. But either way, that disgust is exactly what we see from Jax. Even before the show outright confirms that he's a trypophobe, his whole body language in the bar scene with the corn is just screaming disgust. Look at his face here, and here, and here, and here. He keeps glancing at the others too, almost like he's checking if they notice his discomfort. Maybe he's worried that they'll catch him being vulnerable or laugh at him, especially considering what we know about his biggest fear. And his body is literally turned away from the corn and towards the exit, which makes it look like some part of him just wants to leave the situation entirely.
Is that who you are? You know, you could have asked for my consent before forcing me to see something so completely and utterly disgusting.
Though he is also startled when they play softball, and that could have been genuine fear or just a strong shock because he wasn't expecting the corn to be so close to him. But anyways, now that we understand the condition, let's flip it completely. Because I genuinely think Kinger has the exact opposite reaction to trypophobic imagery. He has trypophilia, a love for bumps and repeating patterns of clusters and holes. And I first got this idea because of one little detail, the corncob blitz.
Give me a corncob blitz.
Like, who orders that? You'd have to be really into corn to willingly consume whatever that is. And yes, the drink is obviously fake and exaggerated because the show wants to emphasize that Kinger is chaotic and insane, but it still made me stop and think for a second. Jax hates corn, Kinger likes it. So naturally, I rewatched the whole show and it became obvious that Kinger has this weird affection for the exact type of imagery that Jax and probably most trypophobes would absolutely hate. And I think it all connects back to Queenie, and I'll tell you exactly why. Kinger literally says he used to hate bugs, but thanks to Queenie, he learned to love them. And what are bugs really if not hundreds or thousands of tiny clustered entities swarming together, laying perfectly round eggs in repeating patterns, building hives with symmetrical holes and hexagonal structures? These things are literally some of the biggest trypophobia triggers ever.
Bunch of little pods on it. Looks kind of like an egg sac or something. It's gross.
Like, I fully understand why trypophobes hate this stuff. I don't blame you guys at all. It's fascinating, but can be super gross, not gonna lie. But for Kinger, those same visuals are tied to memories of his wife. So instead of fear or disgust, he associates bugs with love.
Oh, did someone say something about an insect collection? Insect collection?
It's basically a fear he unintentionally conquered because of Queenie. And it's not even the only fear that he conquers related to trypophobia that relates back to his wife. In the third episode, when Kinger sees the angel head with its giant open mouth and clusters of glowing rings rapidly changing size and brightness, he acts like it's the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen.
You look beautiful, honey.
Which is insane, by the way, because that thing looks horrendous. But I think he subconsciously associates it with Queenie's abstraction, so instead of fear, his brain interprets it as something beautiful and familiar. And then there's probably the biggest example, Queenie herself after she abstracted. She looks like every other abstracted character. Huge, dark, glitchy, covered in hundreds of hypnotizing eyes. It's the kind of thing that Jax would be afraid of. But Kinger's reaction isn't terror, it's actually affection. He walks closer to her, reaches out to touch her face. He just wants one final moment with his wife. He's not repulsed, he's not afraid. He's accepting and loving. And honestly, this interpretation makes Kinger make so much more sense as a character. All the visuals that Jax associates with trauma and fear get reframed through love in Kinger's mind, because the only emotional connection he still fully retains and associates with it is Queenie. And this actually lines up with how memory loss can affect fear responses in real life too. People with amnesia, like our king, sometimes react differently to triggers because they can't fully recall the traumatic memory attached to them anymore. But in Kinger's case, the trigger works in reverse. When he sees trypophobic imagery, instead of panic or disgust, his brain connects it to Queenie and releases feelings of comfort and affection and nostalgia, all that wholesome chemical stuff, which is honestly adorable and devastating at the same time. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And you also get a fun fact. Did you know that the term trypophobia was coined by an anonymous Irish woman on a random internet forum in 2005? Someone has to find this woman and give her a medal, honestly. Anyway, let me know what you think about this video. Leave a like, subscribe maybe, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye!